Have you ever caught yourself thinking, maybe it's just me? Or it's not that bad? Or even, everyone fights sometimes. You guys, abuse doesn't always show up as bruises. Sometimes it's the confusion, it's the self-doubt, the constant anxiety, or even just the way that you have to tiptoe through your own home just to make sure that you don't set somebody off. Today, we're going to be diving deep into recognizing the subtle and sometimes not so subtle signs of abuse and how to tell the difference between conflict and control. This episode may have triggers, so listeners, be advised. Welcome to Life Reassembled. This is the podcast where we learn how to reassemble our lives. I'm Julie Renee. I'm a life coach specializing in trauma recovery and a speaker. Together, we're going to be exploring what it really means to reassemble our lives on the rock after we've spent our entire lives piecing it together on sand. Here, we're going to talk about healing the mind, renewing the spirit, and organizing the parts of our lives that were once overwhelmed by complete chaos. Each episode is a space for reflection, faith, and practical steps for living with peace and intention. So, take a deep breath with me, settle in with some warm coffee, and let's begin reassembling our lives, piece by piece, together. Everybody knows the traditional signs of abuse. It has to be physical. But sometimes, have you noticed that some people are withdrawn or just not themselves lately? They may be dealing with abuse. Or in my case, I was acting like a completely different person because my brain chemicals made me into a different person in order to survive what I was going through. So let's go past the stereotypes, because a lot of people picture the physical harm. And because it looks horrible, and it is horrible, that's usually when people take action. Not necessarily the person who's getting abused, but those who are seeing it. And it's sad because people don't understand the reality of how damaging it is to also be mentally abused, sexually abused, or any things that are just more kind of hidden on the surface level to a degree. And so we have to be aware that every sort of abuse, every type, little, small, one time, it's all bad. And we have to remember, too, that being physically abused doesn't just take away not being mentally abused. When you're being physically abused, your brain reacts to that. It emotionally and mentally does something to you as well. So even though I'm not saying it together in this context, I just want to put in a disclaimer right here that physical abuse is also mental abuse. But sometimes people don't do the mental abuse on purpose. They're just doing the physical, but they're not realizing the emotional damage that is also being done. And so I want to help those who may not understand that they are in an abusive relationship. I pray that you're not. But if you're questioning it in any way, let's kind of dive into if you are and how you can get help. So, abuse is really about power and control. So sometimes it's not just physical acts, but it's about trying to be in control of the situation. And there is a time and place where that is a necessity if you're saving somebody's life. If you see somebody crossing the street and there's a car coming, you do need to take control of the situation and take power over that person and lead them to safety. But the goal in doing that obviously is to protect the person. An abuse situation is to have power and control to hurt the other person and put them in their place, so to speak. And that's never a good alternative for even the person who is being the abuser. So emotional abuse is a constant criticism. It includes gaslighting, manipulation, humiliation, and other sorts of detrimental attacks. Psychological abuse is a lot of threatening, blame shifting, fear tactics, blackmailing. Financial abuse is control over the money, over their work, and over their resources or tools. Spiritual abuse is twisting the faith to dominate or to shame or to confuse to get them to have, again, the power and control. Isolation is slowly cutting somebody off from access to friends, family, or outside influence. And all of this will be done very slowly. It'll be done in a very clever way. And there will be excuses and reasons behind it to make you think like, oh, this is a good idea. Oh, there is nowhere else to go. And they might even position it where, in my case, I was the one looking for housing, but the standards of the housing that I was looking for were so lopsided. There's no way to actually have a place from the requirements that he was setting in order for us to live near my daughter. And we ended up moving an hour and a half away from my family and my daughter, that I would have to not only court ordered, of course, which obviously would have been detrimental if I missed a day for some reason or couldn't reschedule, but I obviously wanted to see her as well. So this was very difficult, and that was just one of the tactics. I experienced all of these things. It is very common for a lot of people to experience all these things, especially for a long period of time. And for those who've never been in that situation in any way, it's very difficult to understand why people stay in an abusive relationship. You have to understand what the abuser has done to their brain, even if it's just physical. And let's say they're not doing anything, they're not saying anything, they're not doing anything else, and it's just physical, let's just say. That still messes with your brain. So even though it's physically hurting you, it messes with your brain. And it opens these doors to these really dark thoughts of you deserve it, I need to earn their love, or whatever the case may be. And so you try your best to hide it, or the abuser is physically hurting them in areas that's kind of hard to tell on the outside. You know, they're not obvious. It's not on the face or on the forearms or things like that. It's in places that are harder to show. There's always ways about how a person tries to manipulate the situation. And sometimes they can get very creative, and it's very sad. So my goal is to hopefully help prevent the abuse from happening in the first place. And it's better to leave the first signs. Don't make excuses. There are so many people, and myself included, who get the red flag after red flag after red flag after red flag, and you still end up marrying them for some reason. And you don't realize what your brain is doing to cope with it and the excuses that you make. So I'm not blaming you. I'm not shaming you. I love you, and I want to help you get out. And if you are in an abusive relationship, let's get you out of there in a safe way. And it's okay. You are deserving of love. You are better than you think you are. I love you, even though I don't know you. I do know you to a degree. I have been there. I have felt that pain, and I know what it's like to surrender to something that you really don't want to surrender to. You're trying to earn something that wasn't yours to earn in the first place. We'll talk about that here a little bit. So like I mentioned, abuse doesn't really start off right away, and it's not usually like in your face loud and like, oh my gosh, I'm being abused. It's very subtle. It's very small. It starts in small little things. That's why it's easy to kind of overwrite them, but it's slow and consistent. And these are this is probably like one of the first red flags we should be aware of. An offhanded comment, a subtle guilt trip, a little control here, a little control there. And suddenly there's a point in your relationship, you're like questioning your sanity. I was half thinking at one point to put myself into a mental institution because my thoughts were so out of this world. And I had to like really get a firm grip because I knew that if I went to a mental institution, I would lose my daughter at that time. I didn't have my other one, my son. And so I was like, no, I cannot do that. I cannot lose her. And so I did everything I could to get my mental state to a place where I could accept what I was going through and still find a way to be happy. And then that made me turn insane, and I lost my daughter anyway. But I never went to a mental institution. And the reason I don't suggest that if you don't need to go is because they will put you on drugs faster than you can assign your name to the paper. And it is very difficult for you to get out. You have to go through all their hoops, and there's a lot of rules or a lot of restrictions. Now, I do appreciate that there's these institutions for people who definitely need it. For those who are self-harming or are going to hurt somebody else, it's like a good way to get into a good timeout. And the reason why I didn't go is because I just wanted to escape what I was going through and kind of get a chance for my head to get clear. And I thought if I went to a mental institution, he couldn't touch me in there, which is true. I don't think he's allowed to visit me while I was in there. But see, that wasn't the right reason to go. So there's a lot of, you have to, and it's hard when you're going through this to decide if that's a safe place or not. There are shelters, a lot of locations. I can't think of any major city that doesn't have a shelter to take you in. And there you will be protected if you need to go. But we'll get into that a little bit later. With every step, I'm like, ooh, get yourself out, get yourself out, get yourself out. All right, so let's talk about the cycle of abuse. It's usually a very specific pattern. And if you're paying attention to it, you'll know and kind of read it. And those who are surviving abusive relationships, especially if you've been in there for a long time, you'll see the pattern and you'll be prepared for it. And it is so mentally exhausting. So if you're preparing mentally all the time for how they're going to come into the door, what they're going to do, what they're going to say, how they're going to react, what's going to go on here, and you're mentally constantly in that mode and you're exhausted just trying to plan your life around their feelings, then you're most likely in an abusive relationship. Tension, building phase, walking on eggshells, trying to keep peace. Incident, outburst, threat, or harm. Reconciliation, apology, excuses, promises. Those are the worst ones because especially the first couple of times, you really believe them. They get better at it. With all of this, they get better at it. They get better at pretending to be the person that you think that they're going to be. They get better at becoming this entity of this persona that you have dreamed of, that you desired, and they get to know you so personally and so intimately that they use that against you 110%. And it's so devastating because you're almost hopeful all the time for this relationship. And then you go through this calm phase, temporary peace, and then it resets again into the cycle. Now, some of that could change depending on who it is. I got a lot of, I knew, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I knew when the anger was coming and when the groveling would be there. Now, of course, he wouldn't word it as groveling, but that's what it was. And I'm sorry, it's pathetic. This cycle is convincing us every single time that, oh, things are going to get better. And it's going to get quiet now because there's that time of peace and you're kind of getting along. Maybe you feel comfortable making a joke or two, or they actually smile at you or kiss you for no reason. And it's just like that dopamine hit that you've been striving for, like you've been working for this entire time, and you finally get it. And when I left, I was doing a lot of research. I had to pause a lot of times, which you might be in the situation too, where you're like, oh my gosh, you're using a lot of words that are triggering. And I understand this completely because I had to go through a lot of healing. And during my journey, I had to pause a lot of podcasts because it would just be like, oh my gosh, that's what it was. Oh my gosh, that's what it was. And it was hard to swallow these concepts. And one of the things that I learned through this process, which is crazy, but it's like for those who are addicted to gambling and they're at the slot machines and they put the quarter in, and then they keep trying and they keep trying and they keep trying. And every once in a while, there's like this glimpse of hope on the other side. Oh, you win a little bit of money. Like, oh, awesome. If I stay in a little bit longer, I can maybe get more money and more money. And you invest so much time and you invest so much energy and so much money into this machine or this person that is very difficult to make the excuse to leave it, thinking, no, if I leave it, somebody else is going to get the machine and they're going to win big. And oh, if I just tried one more time, if I tried one more time. And it's the same hit in our brains that keeps us addicted to a relationship. Isn't that insane? It's an addiction. And so those who are not addicted to a relationship, they don't understand. But they could be addicted to their phone, or they could be addicted to smoking cigarettes, or whatever the case may be. They have their addictions different, where you were like, I could care less about smoking cigarettes, but they do. It's the same thing. Cigarettes are not helping them in any way, right? They're not making them healthier or better. Same thing with being in an abusive relationship. It's not healthy. And so let's go into the impact of our identity and self-perception. This is the hardest for me because this is exactly what it is, that people don't understand what we go through when we're in a relationship like this. How abuse distorts how we see ourselves. It distorts how we see them and other people. Victims start to internalize the blame. And if the abuser is not directly telling you, you're telling yourself. And then it's even worse if you're both doing it. And it's just feeding this idea. If I tried harder, maybe this will stop. Or I shouldn't have done that. It was my fault. That's right. I can't believe I did that. Now, it's one thing to own a mistake, 110%. I think absolutely, hey, I dropped the plate. I own that. But it's not like it's something you did on purpose. And I'm sorry, when women are during their hormonal states, they drop things more often. It's just part of our natural chemistry. Sometimes we can't help it. And yet, if that happens, hormones are all over the place, and we drop something, should we be attacked for that when it was clearly an accident? It's different if our attitude was breaking the plate on purpose or breaking it out of anger and there was no reason for it. That, yes, okay, what's going on there? How are you inside? What's going on? And that should be a concern. And I'm just using it as a very simple example. Gaslighting creates deep confusion between truth and manipulation. Over time, your nervous system learns how to live in fear. And your cortisol levels are spiked. And if you're in the relationship for too long, your levels are off the charts and they will start not functioning correctly. You guys, the biggest thing that we can learn, and please research this, listen to smarter people than me about how our brains function, how they work, how they take in information, how they react to certain things. Because learning about how our brain works helps us so much in thinking more clearly. And I almost had a split personality, so to speak, because I had to figure out a way to survive and make the best of the situation and love my husband through it and forgive him for what he was doing. Because the way I was manipulated was that I was serving God, which was my number one goal, was to be the most godly wife that there ever was, to serve God to no end, which meant to serve my husband to no end, no matter what the cost. And a husband should never take you to hell on purpose and beat you there, tell you you deserve it, and then take you out and then and then just pretend everything's fine. Now, what God brings together should never be separated. But if God didn't bring you together, there is room for you to move. But I didn't know that. I took the submitting to the husband to another level. I am a very committed person to a lot of things. Now, I did mess up in my first marriage, but I was committed for 8 years without any complications. I'm not saying that excuses anything. I'm just saying that it's very rare that that would happen. Now, I was promiscuous, so I would get into relationships that weren't necessarily committed to each other on purpose because I didn't want to be in that arena, which is absolutely insane because if you're with somebody, you're with somebody. But I was in this whole worldly mindset and concept of like, no, everyone just sleeps around with everybody. Like, who cares? So it was just all over the place. And so I don't know where you're at in your relationship, what's going on, and what they're using, but you are aware of it. So I knew what mine was. And because I knew what mine was, it made it that much more harder to leave without knowing the full truth. And I was seeking it though. And I wasn't seeking a truth to get out of the relationship. Once we were married, especially, and right before we got married and I recommitted everything to him, my goal was to go to the ends of the earth for this man, no matter the cost. And I didn't realize why, I didn't understand why these things were happening to someone who supposedly said that they loved me. So that was very confusing. What they were doing and then having me included in it, I'm not quite sure if it was just almost like, hey, if you're with me, then it's okay. Almost like an excuse to do it. Like, oh, hey, my wife agrees with me, and so everything's okay in that realm. It's not like a hidden secret. I don't know, because there's just certain things that were hidden, but then when they were brought to light, it was like, nope, you have to get over it, and you have to come in agreement with it. And then guess what? I'm going to keep throwing it back in your face as much as I possibly can. And you're going to have to just figure out a way to get over it. So guess what? I did figure out a way to get over it. I had to in order to get up in the next morning and take care of my newborn. I had to in order to go see my daughter who is waiting for me. I did it for my kids, and thank God I had them, because otherwise I might not be here on this podcast today. So let's start recognizing the red flags, guys, because this is serious. Your life is so precious. So precious. We have to recognize these red flags, and we have to listen to our intuition, and we have to understand that there's a reason why our gut is twisting every time we're doing something or saying something or being around somebody. We need to listen to this. I truly believe the Holy Spirit is talking to all of us when it's just not a good situation. Do you feel anxious before seeing this person? Do you feel any responsibility for their moods or feelings? Do you hide parts of your relationship from others? Do you make excuses for their behavior? Lord. Do you feel like nothing? Or do you feel like you're not enough? Are you afraid to say no? And if you say no, are you very careful of how you go about doing it? Ready for the consequences that are going to come? If you answered yes to any of these, or even something close to it, you're not in a hard relationship. This is not something that you guys will get over. This is not a Karen and Jim kind of thing. You're in a harmful relationship, and you need to do everything you can to get out. safely and carefully. So what are we going to do? What are you going to do if you think that you're in an abusive relationship? Do not announce your plans to leave, especially if you're in danger. Now, every situation is going to be different. So this is where common sense comes in. And guess what? Even though you're completely exhausted, even though you're sleep deprived, you're probably nutrition deficiency going on in there. Even though all this is happening, you still have enough common sense to figure out how to get out of this relationship carefully and quietly. You can do it. Create a safety plan. And if you have nobody to contact because they took away all your contacts, police will help you get out, especially if there's an emergency. Make sure you have all of your important documents with you. Make sure anything that is of value to you personally, take it with you. Don't expect to take every single thing you own. Be okay with parting with what you need to. Now, God was so gracious with me, I was able to take almost everything. There's like just a handful of things I wasn't able to take, mainly because I couldn't physically lift it into what I needed to. I was able to go back twice. I left with my car full of everything. Okay, in worst case scenario, this is the only thing I'm able to keep for the rest of my life, and start off with, this is what I'm taking, right? That was my first trip. I was able to go back with a U-Haul because God was so good, and I was able to get the rest of it. But again, there was only a few things I still wasn't able to put in there. One, it was too full. I couldn't believe how much stuff I had. But like, I couldn't take a few things because of the weight of it, or I didn't see it, or, I kind of ran out of room. There's a few things, but I'm not crying over it. But again, not everyone's in that situation. You just might have just your car full, or you might be in a situation where you don't have a car and you only have what you have on you. And all you have is your phone and ID or something. Like, just take what you need to. Now, leaving is not going to just take a one step. You're left their presence. It's going to be a process, and it's going to take time. You have to create space between you and them as much as you possibly can. Go somewhere safe. Like I said, shelters will keep you safe. A lot of them separate the men and the women also, so that's very helpful. And they're very strict on who can come in the property and who can't. Like, there's ID checks and all that, like, especially if you let them know, hey, I'm running away from an abusive relationship. This is their name. This is their information. They are not homeless. They don't need a place to go. I need a place to go. Please protect me from them. There's always a place to go. Worst case scenario, you have no money, you have no contacts. Police will protect you. They'll take you to the closest shelter. At the very least, you can get that. I can't think of a place where that doesn't exist. And I do apologize if there are places in the world that don't have these security measures in place to help you. And may God help give you what you need in your brain, because every situation is different. But may He give you the tools to get to a safe place where you can run away from them. I most likely believe that you've done everything you could to make that relationship work, but they're just not getting it. They're not understanding. There's something wrong chemically in their brain where they cannot take care of the relationship properly. And you deserve better than that. Even if you don't believe me, you deserve better than that. I didn't believe this. 3 years ago, somebody says you deserve better than this. I would not have believed them. I would have been like, no, you don't understand. I'm a horrible person. I don't deserve any of this. So I know what that's like. I know what those thoughts are like. But you deserve this, because God didn't think about you before He created the beginnings of the earth for no reason. He didn't send His Son down to go through this horrible abuse for no reason. Talk about somebody who didn't do anything wrong and died for you. You're already saved from this relationship. That's what's so crazy about it. Can we just take a second? You're already saved from this relationship. You just have to come into agreement with it. You already came into agreement with the relationship itself and that lie. So it's the same amount of action to go to the other side. God already saved you from this relationship. The devil wants to keep you trapped into thinking you need to stay there for whatever reason. Again, it's going to change with every situation because the devil knows what your triggers are. He knows what you're looking for. He knew I wanted to be a submissive wife. But maybe you're not married. Praise God. So then there's a different connection that the devil is keeping you in. And guess what? The other person knows it because they know your vulnerability. They know where your weaknesses are. They know what sets you off. They know enough about you to keep you bound mentally and physically in their control because it feeds what they need. And it's so sad. And it's so sad. And my prayer is that you can forgive them, but that does not mean you stay with them. Being abused is not a form of submission. A godly man does not harm his wife, especially on purpose, especially for his gain. Now, again, I'm a woman, so I am talking in that sense of it, but it can definitely be switched around. There could be a man being abused by a woman or whatever the case may be. You might be a child being in an abusive home. You have more resources than anybody as a child in an abusive home to get help. And you do not deserve that. You are better than that. And your soul is so precious that Jesus loved you so much that he died on the cross for you. So you didn't have to be a part of that situation. And I understand that some people are in the situation by accident. Some people are born into the situation. Some people didn't realize maybe there was no red flags beforehand. But if you sense or you're questioning or there's just that uncomfortability, and we went over all the signs, there is a way out. You don't have to stay there. You are not crazy. You are not imagining things. You're not too sensitive. You are not the problem. The abuse is the problem. And this person using abuse to control you in any form is the problem. Abuse thrives in confusion. It needs you to be out of sorts. Because when you're confused, you get drained. And when you get tired, you stay. And you go to what's familiar. And it's an addiction for both parties. The person abusing you and the person being abused. Please reach out to me after you're safe. My goal is to help you get out of this situation first and foremost. I help you. I have programs out there to help rebuild your identity properly, where we are reassembling our lives after the abuse. And God forbid you're in a situation where you have to rebuild your identity during the abuse to go through it and to endure it for whatever reason. However, if you're in that situation, may God be with you. I will help you where I can, but I'm always going to encourage you to get out. Because there's a time and a place where enough is enough. And if they're not going to stop, because that's not going to be their MO, they're going to keep going and they're going to keep going at it harder. And guess what, guys? There's layers to evil. And it just gets worse. It just gets worse. I have left this man more than once. And you're like, wait a minute, Julie, you said you were committed. Remember I went through a period of time where I wasn't. But I tried. But then something so grotesque would happen. These things would go on. I'm like, I just cannot mentally handle this relationship anymore. and I would leave, and there would be the false apology. Not even the words I'm sorry would even come out. The groveling would happen, and I would feel sorry for him. And I would be convinced and deceived and lied to again. And it would start off nice and calm. But every single time at the very beginning of the cycle, I would be so like, what's going to happen? What's going on? I'm waiting for it to happen again. I'm just waiting for it. And I'm looking for it. And I'm just waiting for him to go back to his old self. And then I'm preparing myself. How am I going to handle this again? How am I going to prepare myself for this? Isn't that crazy? Yes, the answer is yes, Julie. You were crazy. I know. I agree with you. I was crazy. I was absolutely crazy. I did not give myself enough time every single time I left. There wasn't enough time for healing and for me to rebuild my identity correctly, get my morals in check, figure out what I really wanted in my life. And of course, there wasn't enough time allowance purposefully. Because if they can get in there as quickly as they can to get their lives back in there and relearn, okay, what did you do while we were gone? What happened there? What's going on? How are you thinking now? So then they can figure out their tactic on how to get in there again. It is lies, it's deception, and it's not new. Nothing is new under the sun. The devil slithered his way into Eve's brain, guys. Whether he was a physical snake or not doesn't matter. The fact that he represents snake-like qualities is enough. In the links below, I'm going to leave a domestic violence hotline. The first questions they ask you straight away is, are you in a safe place? Because they want to make sure if you're not, to help you get out as quickly as possible. If you guys are interested in reassembling your identity after abuse, go to my website. I have a free identity blueprint. You don't have to give me an email or anything. It's on there for you guys, purposely just to help. And it's a huge, great resource. It took a while to put together, and I'm very proud of how it turned out. And it really helps. You kind of reassemble, like, okay, why, where, what, how, all these things in a very safe place, because it's just you and God. And guess what, guys? God already forgave you. You don't have to keep beating yourself up over things that you did or allowed or said. Come to God for it. Repent of what you need to repent of course. But know full well that when we confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord, He's our Savior. And we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us. And the goal within that is repentance, to never turn back and to never go back into that relationship with that person ever again, and to also prevent future relationships like that. Do not go into another relationship straight away. Give yourself time and space. I didn't do that. I was leaving my first husband, and I was like straight away going into like, gosh, I went into 1, 2, 3 relationships within 2-3 months after the divorce was finalized. No, not even finalized. Oh my gosh, Julie, Renee. We talked about getting divorced. Straight away, within 2 months, I was in 3 different kinds of relationships. One was a sexual relationship, just because I was just a crazy person at that time. One of them was with my second husband. And I could just tell, like, that time I was like, this was all over the place. And then I actually got a boyfriend after that, which wasn't even a good idea, hindsight. because I didn't have enough time to be with God. I didn't have enough time to dig in deep with my problems and my issues of like why I'm jumping into bed with somebody else. Why am I trying to get a relationship with somebody else when I knew I wasn't going to marry this person? But still, we were very close. And I eventually broke it off because I wanted to get married, not with him. I just wanted to be married and have more kids. And that was definitely just something that God put inside of me, that desire. But again, when we split up, I just went into a relationship with my second husband and we were dating again. And it was just, guys, there's so much value of being single. There's so much value in that. And I don't want you to miss out and do things backwards like I did. And I'm going to do a podcast later on in regards to like the family line and why God sets it up the way he does, with that grace of being by ourselves before we get married and then before we have kids, and the way the order is on purpose. And it's done so beautifully, and how we grow into those different positions and identities is more natural and easier for our lives versus how it's now. Everything's so backwards. We're living with people before we're married. We're having kids. We're doing things all upside down. And it is making us crazy in general. And our mental health is like completely shattered. And we're just going off of like research that keeps changing. So let's stick with what the facts are. If we're in a very abusive relationship, we need to get out now. We need to get out safely. And you have to be okay with it. You have to be ready, mentally and emotionally. If you have kids, do it for them. If it's just yourself, do it for yourself, because you are worth more than that. You're worth more than that. Because guess what? Before they came along, weren't you more valuable? Aren't you a different person now? If you look at pictures of the past, weren't you a different person? They saw that value. And sadly, they're mentally messed up that they had to take that value and destroy it or be selfish with it and take it for themselves. There are people who are so mentally unstable that they have to destroy innocence. They have to destroy beauty. They have to destroy things that are sacred. And that's what abusers do. And they're very smart. And that's why they're able to get you. So it's not your fault that you fell into this relationship. Because of course you did. They were everything you were looking for. Be aware of the red flags before you get into a relationship. Be okay to say no when they get in the car and you don't feel comfortable with that. Be okay with the choices that you want to make, but you're too afraid to go with. Because better a life knowing you did everything you could, and saying yes where you should have said yes and saying no where you should have said no. It's better than having regrets. And you might think, oh my gosh, Julie, Renee, I hear what you're saying, but I've been in this relationship too long. It's been 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25. I think the most recent one I heard about was 25 years. 25 years of being mentally abused. That's hard to accept getting out of that relationship. And there could be definitely fear behind that. The spirit of fear was keeping me in that relationship. It wasn't until God removed the spirit of fear out of me that I was able to actually get out. I didn't even realize I had the spirit of fear in me. But it makes sense, because it is a fear tactic of some sort to keep you in place, to keep you in this cage that opens up if you just walk through it. It's an illusion. And I know what you're saying, like, no, Julie, it's so real. You don't know. You don't understand my situation. Trust me, I do. even if I've not been in that exact situation that you have been, you haven't been in my situation. And again, I know, because if you told me 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it's just an illusion, you could just leave, I would have thought you were crazy too. But once you're out of it and your mind starts having clarity and rest, and it starts to become healthy again, and it starts to rebuild and reassemble the way that God created my brain to reassemble, and your brain the way it reassembles the way He created you, you'll be like, oh my gosh, it is an invisible cage set up by the enemy, and you 110% can walk through it. You walked into it, you can walk out of it. Check out the hotline if you need to get a hold of somebody. Feel free to contact me. You can message me privately on these socials. We have a Facebook group that is for situations like that. If you have any questions or concerns and you just kind of want to hear from other people, you can be anonymous. But we're here to support you and love on you. Your mental health is so valuable to me, and I want everyone to be healthy. And I don't want you in an abusive relationship, because you deserve so much better than that. May the Lord be with you. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation on Life Reassembled. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who is also rebuilding their life, because none of us are meant to do this alone. To keep growing with us, join us on the Life Reassembled Facebook community. Check out our free identity blueprint on our website, or learn more about our coaching and upcoming courses at reassembledlife.com. That's re-assembledlife.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Life Reassembled for daily encouragement and resources. Remember that healing doesn't happen overnight, but every small step forward is part of reassembling your life.